3 Sinister True Lighthouse Hauntings Exposed, Spine-Chilling Secrets of the Cursed Coastline. Sarah shivered as she pulled her children closer to her. Hollow Tide was a picturesque small town, but darkness slithered beneath its charm like a serpent hiding in the grass. The lighthouse, worn and wicked, stood as a crooked sentinel on the rocky coastline, its stories etched in whispers and shadows. Local legend spoke of 3 families that had vanished, swallowed whole by the sea, or perhaps by malevolence that lingered, unrepentant. There was something sinister afoot. Settling into a creaky old house near the lighthouse felt like unwrapping a gift. Beautiful wrapping, but what lay inside was anything but. The salty air was sweet for the moment, a fleeting comfort overshadowed by palpable dread. Emma and Jake played in the rooms while Sarah unpacked, her heart heavy with the weight of their past. But that weight shifted when she found the symbols in the children's bedroom, strange etchings carved in the wooden walls, running like veins through the wood. Just the kid's imagination, she muttered to herself, but that did little to ease her racing heart. At night, Jake would wake, wide-eyed, staring into the darkness, his innocent laughter chilling her to the bone. Voices danced on the breeze, whispering his name, beckoning him like a moth to a flame. "Mommy!" Jake cried one night, his voice trembling. Sarah rushed in, and the shadows flitted, mocking her rising fears. What on earth was happening? She felt her breath hitch in her throat. Was she losing her grip on reality? The townsfolk at the local bar seemed kind but gave vague smiles when she brought up the lighthouse. One bartender leaned in, eyes darkened with concern, and warned her about the disappearances. Chills ran down her spine. This wasn't mere folklore but a festering truth. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. Days stretched on, and the town's warm facade cracked, revealing faces shadowed by secrets. Neighbors offered help, barely masking their distrust, and soon, compliments turned to stares that felt alive. Fear wove steadily into the fabric of their days. And one evening, she found a dilapidated journal hidden among rocks near the lighthouse. The pages whispered warnings of vanishings and cursed spirits, and that chilling reality hit hard. All those legends were rooted in terror. As a storm brewed, Sarah's resolve solidified. She had to protect her children from whatever darkness coiled around the lighthouse. Thunder rumbled, low and ominous, as she gripped her flashlight, venturing closer. Then, she heard Jake's laughter echoing through the gusts like a siren's call, but it had an undercurrent that twisted her gut. Time was running out. Those stone walls held secrets that could lead them to salvation, or doom. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its beams slicing through the night. Would she find answers, or were they already lost to the cursed coastline forever? The air around the lighthouse felt thick, heavy with anticipation. Sarah's heart raced as she approached, each step crunching on gravel that echoed like a drum roll in the silence. The beam of her flashlight flickered, illuminating the crumbling stonework and shadows that stretched and flickered like ghosts playing in the night. A chill coursed down her spine. The lighthouse was alive, and it was watching her. "Jake," she called, her voice barely a whisper against the roaring wind. All she could hear in response was the relentless crashing of waves against jagged rocks, angry and relentless. And then it hit her: the laughter that had called her was fading, replaced by something deeper. Something darker. She reached the door, warped by time and tempest. It creaked open as if inviting her inside, or warning her away. The air inside was stale, thick with mold and salt. Each breath tasted of decay. The beam from her flashlight danced across the walls, revealing even more unsettling symbols etched into the stone, intertwined with seaweed and dirt. Some were simple maritime designs, but others hinted at ritualistic horror. "Mommy, come play." Jake's voice echoed again, but it sounded so far away. Panic surged as she realized he wasn't in sight. The laughter was coming from above the lantern room, the highest point of the lighthouse. A rush of dread propelled her up the winding staircase, each step creaking under her weight like the bones of the building, moaning with the stories of the lost. When she reached the top, her breath caught in her throat. The lantern room was wide but empty, save for the dusty glass that refracted the glow of her flashlight into 1,000 eerie reflections. A terrible instinct told her not to trust what she saw. Shadows twisted in the corners, darting away from her light like frightened animals. "Jake!" she cried again, fear clawing at her throat. The air was thickening, heavy with a weight that pressed into her chest. Was she too late? The laughter came again, but it was now mingled with a chorus of whispers, thousands of voices overlapping, each more chilling than the last. Join us, they coaxed. She wished she could drown them out, but the words wrapped around her mind like vines, squeezing tighter with each second. "Mommy!" The cry came again, but this time it was accompanied by a sound so unsettling it froze her solid, the scrape of tiny hands against the old wooden floor, followed by a guttural breath that sent shivers through her. Sarah stumbled backward, the fear tangling with something more primal, instinct screaming at her that this was no longer just about the lighthouse, but about her very soul. She tore her gaze from the fading glass, seeking escape, hope flickering like the light she clutched. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him, Jake, standing at the entrance of the lantern room. His vacant expression chilled her to the core, something unimaginable behind his wide eyes. It was as if he was at the brink of understanding what it meant to be claimed by the lighthouse. "Jake!" "No!" she yelled, lunging forward. As she reached him, an icy wind gusted, extinguishing her flashlight in an instant. The darkness swirled around them, suffocating, and the low whispers transformed into desperate screams of those lost long ago. She felt herself getting pulled backward, the shadows tugging at her, their grip ice-cold. "Mommy!" Jake's voice faded into the night, replaced by the haunting refrain of the vanishing families. Suddenly, Sarah's grip slipped. She stumbled back, dropping to her knees, panic flooding her mind. The last thing she saw was the spiral staircase bathed in moonlight before the darkness wrapped around her completely, and then there was silence. Had she lost him? Lost herself? The lighthouse stood tall, silent once more, its beam cutting through the dark like a knife. The questions lingered, drowning in an unsettling truth what had been awakened. The stories were waiting, still hungry. What lay beneath the lighthouse? Would Sarah ever escape the malevolence that had claimed so many? Sarah jolted awake, gasping, as if emerging from a deep and terrible dream. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering through the shattered glass of the lantern room. Her body was cold and heavy, as if coated in the chill of countless past winters. She squeezed her eyes shut, straining to recall Jake's last words, but they faded like smoke. When she opened her eyes, she was alone. Panic gripped her chest. "Jake!" A wild shout, but the echoes of her voice swallowed by the nothingness. She was still in the lighthouse, its walls looming like sentinels around her. The air felt charged, vibrating with an unseen energy. Shadows danced with malicious intent, stirring in the corners, pulsing as if alive. Each heartbeat thrummed in her ears, loud, insistent, drowning out the sounds of the raging sea below. Time stood still. She crawled toward the edge of the lantern room, leaning over to peer down the winding staircase that spiraled into darkness. "Jake!" she called again, desperation clawing at her vocal cords. Nothing. Just silence, thick and oppressive. The laughter returned. It bubbled up from the depths of the lighthouse, mechanical and eerie, echoing like a twisted lullaby. Join us, they beckoned with shrill clarity, wrapping around her mind like a noose. There was no mistaking it. The voices were those of children lost, forsaken. Instinct pushed her feet towards the stairs, sending her toppling down. She grabbed the rail, her fingers slipping as a cold wind swept through the hollowed space. She stumbled, crashing onto the next landing, breathless and disoriented. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drum urging her to flee. In the dim light, a faint glow flickered in the distance. She pressed on, following it, a moth to the flame, driven by hope and terror intertwined. The walls were damp, slick with history, each step echoing a past she didn't want to face. Shadows shifted, dark figures lurking just beyond the threshold of her vision. "Mommy," the voice was close now, close enough to wrap the tendrils of hope around her heart. It was weak, pained. "Help me, Jake!" she screamed. She dashed through the winding hallways, the whispers turning into a cacophony of terror, each step resounding with the cries of the Lighthouse's victims. There was no retreat now. She felt their desperation, their longing for salvation, a dreadful tether binding her to this cursed place. As she reached another flight of stairs, an icy hand gripped her ankle. She screamed, thrashing, her own voice swallowed by the mounting fury of the whispers. "Join us!" The hands pulled her down, cold as the depths of the ocean, relentless and overwhelming. The laughter of children rang in her ears, joyous yet fractured, like cracks in a porcelain doll. The coldness moved up her leg, constricting, pinning her to the steps. She flailed violently, instinct screaming at her to escape, but the shadows were stronger. Just as despair began to unravel her, a flash of movement pulled her gaze. From the darkness, she caught a glimpse of Jake, his figure illuminated by an unnatural light, eyes wide but hollow. "Mommy," he said again, but his voice was different now, dry, almost robotic, like a marionette with strings pulled tight by the hands of unseen puppeteers. "Jake!" she cried, reaching out toward him. But before she could move, the darkness folded in around her, crushing with a weight that felt alive. The whispers transformed into screams, desperate and piercing, shattering any remnants of resolve. Her mind raced as shadows consumed her. She felt the precipice of no return, the lighthouse hungry for her soul and for all she held dear. With a final cry, she reached for Jake, those hollow eyes staring back at her, pleading, as the lighthouse's true nature began to unfold. But what if these were not the only souls the lighthouse craved? What if it wanted her not just to join them but to become the very voice that called others into its depths? In the swell of darkness, just as the last tendrils of hope flickered out, Sarah felt a sharp pull from behind. A sudden gasp left her lips, a force dragging her up, away from the abyss. But was it salvation, or another trap? The coldness released its grip only slightly, like a predator toying with its prey. Sarah felt herself lift, yet the shadows clawed at her waist, pulling her back into their embrace. She gasped, neck craning as she fought for breath, the icy air biting her lungs like 1,000 tiny teeth. Upward she was dragged, but no light met her eyes. The laughter echoed again, twisted like a child's game gone awry. "Help us!" they cried, over and over, until their voices morphed into a chorus of shrill desperation. Each word scraped against her mind, digging deeper, setting nerves ablaze with fear. Then she was released. Crumpling onto the floor of a dim room, she looked around frantically. It was a long corridor, lined with frames that held only darkness, their images missing. Just more shadows mocking her. The air was stale, thick with abandonment and salt, as if lifetimes of despair seeped from the very walls. "Jake!" she forced out again, the name a lifeline she clung to in the storm of echoes that surrounded her. In response, the eerie silence felt like a fist tightening around her throat. Another flicker caught her attention. She turned. A figure stood at the far end of the hall. It was Jake, his frail form illuminated by a ghostly light. "Mommy," he whispered again, each syllable a plea laced with something darker. She stumbled toward him, her heart pounding as she read his expression, a blank slate tinged with fear. When she reached him, the moment shifted. Jake was no longer just huddled darkness. Something loomed behind him, swelling from the corners. Shadows twisted and elongating from the walls, rising like smoke around her child. She felt a surge of dread as the coldness coiled around her ankles again. "Stay back!" she yelled, knowing it was futile. "Jake, run!" But each attempt to save him only drew the figures nearer, their forms indistinguishable yet grotesquely familiar. "Join us," they hissed, their voices distorting into a cacophony of delightful malice. Jake turned abruptly, his gaze piercing into her. "I can't leave, Mommy. I have to stay. I can save you." The words burned. Each one was a dagger trailing down her spine, cold and consuming. Panic exploded within her, and she lunged forward, reaching for him. But the moment she grasped his arm, she felt a jolt, like electricity snapping. His flesh was cool, too cool. It chilled her core. "No. You don't know what you're saying." She pulled with all her might, but the tug-of-war was futile. Something unseen gripped him tighter. I can help them," he said softly, almost convincingly. Just then, the children's laughter surged, rising like the tide. Their tiny fingers clawed at the edges of her mind, urging her to give in, to accept the inevitable. The faces in the shadows shifted and blurred, features of former victims stretching grotesquely, demanding her attention. One face caught her eye, the visage of a child, maybe 6, with sunken eyes and hollow cheeks. "Help us," it whispered, mouth moving in rhythm with countless others. Horrified, Sarah's heart raced, realizing she was caught in their web. They wanted Jake as their own. They wanted her. Throwing her head back, Sarah spat out the words, "No. I won't let you take him." It felt like declaring war inside a battlefield paved with souls. The shadows stuttered for a second, recoiling as if wounded, but then surged back angry, relentless, their fervor magnified. The laughter roared, drowning out all reason. Suddenly, she felt a fracture within herself, like the lighthouse had caught hold of her spirit. It yearned to consume her, and in that moment, a thought struck deep. What if she was the key? What if she could break the cycle? With renewed desperation, she pulled Jake harder, feeling a strain that rippled through her bones. "Fight. Please, Jake. We can escape together." But his gaze faltered for just an instant, and the shadows sensed weakness. They screeched, deafeningly so. And in the swell of chaos, she caught the glimmer of opportunity. Behind the shrieks of ambition from the abyss, a door slightly ajar glimmered just within reach at the end of the corridor, but could she reach it before the shadows pulled her under? Her feet moved instinctively, and Sarah raced toward the doorway, clinging to the hope of escape as the echoes around her howled for more. Would she save Jake or surrender to the lighthouse's insatiable greed? As she neared the threshold, she felt the darkness swirl behind her, closing in. Feelings of despair and dread marched forward, but she had no other choice: step through, or never leave at all. With one last glance back at Jake, held fast and frozen in the shadows, she took a leap into the unknown, praying it wasn't too late. But what awaited her on the other side? The moment Sarah leaped through the doorway, she felt a rush of air, warm yet damp, swirling around her as everything went black. Her heart drummed wildly as if warning her of the impending doom. She landed hard on a wooden floor, splintered and rotting beneath her. Gasping for breath, she rose to her knees and looked around. The room was dimly lit, stained glass windows casting eerie patterns across the walls. Shadows danced in the corners, but they felt different now, lighter, more distant. Were these new shadows her enemies, or remnants of the prison she had just escaped? Stumbling to her feet, Sarah took in her surroundings. The room appeared like a forgotten chapel, with tattered pews and a crumbling altar at the far end. Dust hung in the air like memories waiting to be recalled, and whispers echoed through the hallowed space. "Help us, save us, join us." Each syllable trickled down her spine, igniting her fear. Instinctively, she pulled her arms into her body, half expecting the darkness to rush back in. She could feel the echoes pulling at her, trying to drag her back to the corridor, the shadows. Jake. Panic welled again. "Jake!" she cried, hoping his name would reach him, but silence greeted her. A shiver ran through the room, low and menacing. Sarah's eyes darted to the altar. Was there something there, something she needed? The silence thickened, pressing against her like a weight. She hesitated, then forced herself to approach the altar, her breath hitching with every step. As she neared, she saw what was laid out: a tapestry woven with faces, children's faces, their expressions frozen in anguish. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, and the moment her fingers brushed against the fabric, the tapestry rippled as though it had a life of its own. The children's faces contorted, pleading silently for her attention. It felt like thousands of eyes staring into her soul. Fingers clammy with dread, she stepped back. "What do you want from me?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the chapel. The whispers morphed into a tempestuous howl, rage brewing beneath the surface. "Save us!" they cried, "and save him!" She covered her ears, fighting against the noise that threatened to fracture her mind. Each plea resonated with her maternal instinct, a compulsion to help, but she couldn't afford to lose herself in the darkness. "Not again," she whispered to herself. Refusing to succumb, she turned sharply and faced the door she had entered. As if summoned, a cold gust of wind blew through, pinning her in place. The reverberation of laughter returned, starkly recalling the shadows, pulling at her skirt like desperate children. "Join us," they purred, a motherly caress twisted into something vile. "No!" she screamed, as if defiance would shatter their hold. In that moment, she felt a pulse deep within her, a connection to Jake mingling with her own resolve. She had caved once before, but never again. Suddenly, she heard a sound, faint yet distinct. The creaking of wood, the soft patter of feet. Jake. He was here. Empowered, she spun back toward the altar, searching for answers. A faded sign on the altar began to glow, illuminating symbols she didn't recognize but felt drawn to. A voice broke through her thoughts, softer, more grounded. "The lighthouse, it's a cycle. The souls must be freed." Her heart raced. This wasn't just about her or the shadows. It was deeper, a conjoined fate trapped in a perpetual loop. She glanced back at the tapestry. "You're the key," she murmured, piecing together the puzzle. With newfound determination, she reached toward the symbols, expecting a surge of pain or dilemma. Instead, the warmth flooded her fingers, bringing light to her body. The shadows screeched in protest, swirling violently around her. "Come to me, Jake!" she cried, breathing in the energy pulsing from the altar, ready to fight back. But just as she summoned her last shred of strength, an overwhelming darkness surged forward from the shadows, freezing her breath in her lungs. Was it too late? Was this her only chance to free her son? Would she have to sacrifice herself for Jake to escape? The final clash of light against shadow echoed through the chapel, a battle that would determine their fate. What twisted truths awaited them at the end of this fight? The darkness pulsed like a living thing, sinking into Sarah's skin, squeezing the air out of her lungs. An unseen force gripped her, pulling her toward the tapestry again. She could sense the weight of the trapped souls, hundreds of hands reaching out, curling around her ankles. Panic surged through her veins. "Stay away!" she shouted, reeling back. But the shadows roared louder, their voices merging into a chilling chorus. "Join us!" The disembodied that once sounded like lost children now twisted into a menacing demand. "Never!" she snarled, heart thrumming like a rattling engine. As if in answer, the chapel trembled, dust pattering down from the ceiling like tiny falling ghosts. Her resolve faltered for a heartbeat. Then, the ground she stood on split apart. The altar cracked, creating a fissure, and she could see something dark lurking beneath. A ghastly face surfaced in the shadows, smirking, its hollow eyes filled with malice. "You cannot escape!" it hissed, the sound echoing painfully in her ears. Sarah staggered back, shock coursing through her. This wasn't just a fight for her child, it was a reckoning. Was she meant to join this grotesque family? Eyes wide, she furiously shook her head. "Get away from me!" The shadows thrashed violently, pelting the altar with debris, and in that moment, she saw Jake's face flicker like a candle in the wind. The image was gone almost as quickly, replaced by the tapestry that swelled and twisted ominously, yearning for her touch again. "Jake!" She screamed, heat racing to her cheeks as despair clawed at her heart. I'm coming. Clenching her fists, she pressed forward, determined to unearth the truth. The glowing symbols on the altar spoke to her now, clearer than ever, two intertwined serpents, a lighthouse, a guiding light, beckoning to her. With a leap of faith, she grasped the edge of the tapestry once more. The moment she did, a burst of light exploded from her fingertips. The children's faces twisted in agony, merging with the shadows, crying out, "Free us!" But the shadows reacted violently, whipping around her in gale-force winds, tearing at her clothes and skin. Sarah felt each icy tendril grip her, trying to drag her back into oblivion. Yet, through the clamor, she held tight to her memories of Jake, the softness of his laugh, the light in his eyes. She envisioned the lighthouse, vivid waves crashing against a rocky shore, far from the horror surrounding her. Maybe it was not about saving herself, but lighting a way for those lost. She must set them free. Be the light. A voice shouted from inside her, fierce and steady. It sounded like her own, yet transcended her being. Mustering every ounce of determination, she cried out, "I will not be your vessel." The power surged through her, illuminating the room in a radiant glow. Shadows shrieked, retreating as she expanded the light, engulfing everything around her. Faces she recognized, mothers, fathers, but mostly children, reached out, longing for her warmth. Please, their voices harmonized, their plea echoing through the chapel, "We just wanted to go home." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she touched the tapestry, drawing its energy toward her heart. In that sacred moment, she felt her soul intertwine with theirs. They were not monsters, they needed a voice, too, the shadows wailed, thrashing against the encroaching light. But as the tapestry glowed brighter, a blinding flash engulfed the room, and the whispers shifted to a choir of grateful cheers. Suddenly, Sarah was alone, standing in the center of the chapel that seemed reborn, bathed in golden light. Trembling, she turned, searching for Jake. "Jake?" she called, stepping forward, the silence hanging heavy. Then, a faint voice emerged from the deep recesses of the room, a whisper of hopes and dreams, echoing through the walls. "Mom?" Hope surged like a tidal wave, but just as she took a step toward the source, shadowy figures began to coalesce around the edges of the chapel, eyes glowing. They weren't gone. They had merely transformed, now lurking on the periphery of the light. "Come to us," they beckoned, voices seductive, fragmenting her heart once more. What would she have to confront now to raise her son from the darkness? Would the past ever fully release its grip on her? The air grew thick again, an oppressive weight that clawed at Sarah's chest. "No, no," she whispered, backing away from the encroaching darkness. Panic gripped her like a vice. She could feel them, those lost souls writhing in the fringes, their eyes smoldering, urging her closer with their whispers. "Jake," she called again, her voice shaky. "Where are you?" She took another step forward, and the shadows surged closer, hungry and fierce, like dark waters rising to swallow her whole. Their eyes sparkled like malignant stars, and the ground beneath her shifted, the chapel architecturally straining against the weight of sorrow and wrath. The tapestry pulsed with a new rhythm, shimmering and flickering, beckoning her closer still. She wanted to reach out, to understand what it wanted to reveal, but fear rooted her in place. "Join us," they crooned again, a siren song weaving through her thoughts. The darkness was persuasive, seductive, tugging on her heartstrings. In the chaos of shadows, a vision began to unravel, a flicker of Jake smiling, reaching, calling her name. The image was intoxicating, filling her with dread yet igniting her resolve to push through the despair. Suddenly, a jagged shadow broke away from the seething mass, darting toward her like a bullet. Sarah gasped, instinctively shielding herself. But it halted abruptly, revealing the distorted form of a child, dirt-smudged, pleading eyes, voice trembling. "Please help us." The form flickered, and in an instant, it transformed into a horrific amalgamation of faces, twisting in fear and pain. "Free us. You can stop this." The voices joined in a haunting choir, echoing their desperation. No. Sarah shouted, her voice steady now. I will not be your conduit. She felt warmth flooding through her, a fire ignited by determination. She clenched her fists, drawing strength from the love she had for Jake, but the tapestry's glow shifted. Its bright symbols twisted darkly, silhouetted faces swirling in an ominous dance. The shadows hissed, an angry wind clawing at her sanity. Join us. You must pay the price. As she struggled against the overwhelming tide of despair, a flicker of defiance ignited in her heart. You will not control me. Sarah's voice echoed through the chapel with unexpected clarity. In that moment, she decided. She would confront the darkness, rather than flee. She charged forward, arms outstretched. I will find my son. You cannot take him from me. With a speed that blurred, she flung herself toward the tapestry, feeling the light pulsate against her fingers. Each symbol thrummed with energy, desperate for her touch. She felt a surge, a connection dancing through her veins, vibrant and alive. The shadows shrieked, recoiling, as if her resolve was a weapon. The echo of lost children howled like a storm, clawing at her ears. You will be lost to us. They screeched, their voices merging into a chaotic cacophony. Sarah felt herself destabilizing, the foundation of her being crumbling beneath the weight of their fury. Stop! She cried, pushing harder against the tapestry. I refuse to be just another ghost to torment. And just as she thought she couldn't take another moment of this blistering anguish, she felt a small, warm presence, fingers intertwining with hers. Mom, don't be scared. Jake's voice floated through the tempest, clear and calm. It stopped her cold, grounding her in a sea of chaos. The shadows hesitated. Jake? She blinked, heart hammering in her chest. I'm here. But all around her, the darkness began to resettle, rising against her resolve. The glimmer of hope she clung to began to wane as the swirling figures resumed their fierce approach. Come to us. Their soothing tones morphed into echoes of cruelty, and she knew she had to act. The light still pulsed, it was a beacon. How could she unleash its power? And then, the realization hit her: what if she had to share the burden? What if freeing herself meant uniting with the lost? With a deep breath, Sarah raised her arms, searching for the brightness in the tapestry. I will light the way. I will not forget you. In that moment, shadows lunged at her. What would happen next? Would she succeed in breaking the curse, or would the darkness swallow her whole? The shadows lunged, their tendrils reaching out like grasping fingers, hungry for the warmth of her flesh. Sarah felt the pull of despair, a bone-deep chill dragging her toward the grotesque figures. They wanted her soul, and the gnawing fear clawed at her insides. But Jake's voice lingered, anchoring her with an undeniable strength. Mom! He cried again, and the sound sliced through the darkness like a knife. I need you. With a fierce determination, she pushed against the encroaching darkness, feeling her heart pound like a war drum. The tapestry shimmered, each symbol resonating with the sorrow and hope wrapped around her. The piercing whispers of the lost souls thrummed in her ears, rising to a fever pitch. Release us! They shrieked, their voices a cacophony of agony. The chapel began to tremble, the very foundation shaking as if the building were alive, straining against the weight of their torment. Sarah gritted her teeth, driving deeper into the light pulsing at the tapestry. No! You've taken enough. I will not abandon my son. The anger in her voice reverberated through the shadows, and for a brief moment, the figures shrank back. She felt a surge. The tapestry responded, colors swirling, shimmering like starlight against night's fabric. She was not just a vessel, she was the flame against their darkness. But then, doubts crept in. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if this was a sick game, one where she lost everything? Her fingers trembled on the glowing patterns, uncertainty seeping in. The shadows drew nearer, and the air thickened, suffocating her resolve. Mom! Jake's voice was a faint echo now, drowned in the distorted cries from the abyss. The fear clawed its way up her throat. "Please. Jake." She whimpered, frustration boiling over. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm trying. I just don't know how." Just as despair bore down on her, an otherworldly light erupted from the tapestry, illuminating the chaos around her. The symbols fluttered to life, now harmonizing with Jake's voice. "Mom. Take my hand." With desperation fueling her, Sarah stretched her arm into the blinding radiance. The warmth enveloped her fingers, a tether to her child's spirit. She could feel his hope tying them together, pulling against the shadows that swirled around. The darkness recoiled, hissing with a fury that rattled her bones. "He will condemn you, too," they wailed. "You cannot love him and escape with your soul intact." A single thought ignited her heart: a mother's love can change everything. "I want to abandon him." She shouted defiantly. The tapestry flared bright, and in that moment of clarity, she understood the truth: she had to become the light. A fierce resolve coursed through her, as she focused on all the love she held for Jake, the memories they built together, the laughter, the warmth, the moments wrapped in joy. "Together," she cried, feeling the light mingle with their desperation. "Together, we can fight." And suddenly, the shadows began to thrash violently, howling with rage as they twisted and pulled at her. But the warmth of Jake's spirit filled her, a glow that pulsated through the dark, igniting a fire within. "Together," she repeated, urgency crashing down on her. She could see the faces of the lost souls shift, their expressions faltering as they felt their grip loosen. You cannot," one wispy figure stammered, its face a grotesque mask of fear. But as their grip lessened, Sarah felt a shift, a palpable power drawing strength from the love she shared with Jake. In one synchronized breath, she shouted, "You will no longer own this place. I release you." The brightness surged, an avalanche of luminosity that threatened to unravel the anguish binding the spirits. The shadows writhed in protest, their cries merging into a wall of sound that threatened to break her resolve, but she held firm, even as the echoes of trapped souls clawed at her sanity. The light expanded, unleashing a violent burst of energy that pushed the darkness back, plunging the chapel into chaos. Would it be enough? The tapestry's glow enveloped her, bouncing off the walls, illuminating the chapel in a blinding radiance that threatened to consume her whole. Through the storm of despair, she felt Jake's presence entwined with hers. "Mom, don't lose me." A choice loomed before her, a precipice fraught with uncertainty. Would she step into the unknown, risking everything to save her son? The shadows recoiled, the chaos swirling, but the path remained shrouded in darkness. The question hung in the air, heavy with fear: could she truly save them both, or would the darkness drag them back into despair? Sarah braced herself, heart pounding. She would find a way. She had to. The frenzied light exploded from the tapestry, blinding Sarah as shadows coiled around her like serpents, desperate to reclaim their prey. The chapel shook violently, dust and debris cascading from the ancient beams, each sound like a soul tearing free from its cage. She felt the pull of the darkness, heavy and cold, yet Jake's spirit glowed brighter in her mind, fighting against the darkness that enveloped her. "Hold on!" she screamed, more to herself than to her son. The warmth from the tapestry infused her. It was like a second heartbeat, a pulse that surged through her veins. She extended her arm, reaching for Jake's light, but the shadows tugged, an icy grip squeezing her thoughts and her vision. Suddenly, the cacophony shifted. The howls of the shadows grew frantic, caught between rage and fear. They knew they were losing ground. "You think this is your triumph?" A whisper slithered through the chaos, low and mocking. "Love will not save you, it will chain you to us." Tremors rolled through Sarah's body, as if the shadows themselves were feeding on her doubt. She thought of her son, his laughter, the moments that made her heart swell with pride. "You are my light," she cried, willing herself to believe the words. "You will not take him." In that instant, tendrils of darkness snapped at the edges of the light, a storm of despair trying to drown her. Ghostly faces surfaced amidst the shadows, twisted visages of lost souls, lamenting their eternal fates. Each tortured expression gnawed at her heart, each tortured cry threatening her resolve. "Join us. It's far too late." They wailed, their voices rising to a fever pitch that echoed in the chapel. The temperature plummeted, a sinister chill creeping down her spine. "You will suffer just like us." "No." The word tore from her throat, fueled by anger and desperation. The light surged brighter, illuminating the chapel with a brilliant glow. With a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, she pulled Jake's essence closer, drawing strength from their bond. "All of you, go back to where you belong," she shouted, fighting against the weight of the darkness. She was not here to succumb, she was here to free her son. The chapel echoed with her defiance as the shadows writhed, flickering in and out of form, struggling against the brightening glow. "You think you can banish us?" One spirit shrieked, its voice a mix of rage and confusion. "You will see us again. We will claim what is ours." But Sarah felt the grip of fear loosening. The air around her shimmered with the pure energy from the tapestry, and she understood that she was not alone. The lost souls were trapped, yes, but they could be set free. Each one held their own fragment of love and with it, a glimmer of hope. "I will not let you win." As her voice rang out through the chapel, an intense light shot forward, darting toward the flickering shadows. It pierced through like an arrow, scattering the darkness momentarily. The shadows shrieked, an agonizing sound that vibrated through the air, but the glow didn't wane. "Help us, Sarah." It was a collective plea, rising from the depths of the lost souls, finding her heart once more. "You hold the key." For a heartbeat, she hesitated, trapped between the cries of the damned and the love she felt for Jake. They were asking for freedom even as she fought for her son. Was it possible? Could her love bridge the gap between two worlds? "Jake!" she called, searching for his spirit in the midst of chaos. "We can save them." He emerged, bursting forth like the sun breaking through clouds, and pain etched on his small, ghostly face. "Mom, you have to focus on us." The shadows shrieked louder, tightening their grip around her. "Choose. Your child or the lost souls." The weight of the decision almost crushed her. In that moment, the tension was unbearable. Could love truly unite them all? With a determined breath, Sarah rejected despair. "I choose love." The words thrummed through her, a mantra against the darkness. The tapestry flared anew, and for an instant, all was still. The shadows hesitated, caught in a moment of dread. Then, the pulse of light surged outward, a wave crashing against the encroaching darkness, but as the light expanded, a singular truth struck her, a sinking realization that the shadows were not simply dark puppets, but fragments of her own fears, her regrets. What if, beyond the haunting cries and the tortured souls, lay something worse? Something that dwelled deep within her own memories. As the furious echoes of the chapel crescendoed, Sarah prepared for the final confrontation, heart racing. The fabric of love and despair twisted tighter, a web that could break or bind them anew. Would she embrace the truth lurking in the shadows, or would she falter in the face of darkness? The air crackled with tension, leaving one haunting question tinged with uncertainty. What if she had been fighting against herself all along? Sarah felt the weight of the shadows cling to her, suffocating her spirit. The fear tried to smother her resolve, but she pushed back. "I choose love," she shouted once more, each syllable a clarion call against despair. The tapestry pulsed in response, its brilliance igniting the walls of the chapel with soft warmth. Beneath the shadows, she recognized flickers of the lost, sorrowful echoes of lives once lived. "Mom!" Jake's voice pierced through the chaos, cutting through the noise like a lighthouse beam piercing the dark. It was grounded, firm. Guided by the sound, she focused on him, following that flicker of light, the bond they shared. Together. she urged, summoning every ounce of strength she could muster. She reached for Jake, determination surging through her veins. The tapestry shimmered, brightening in tandem with her heart's resonance, each heartbeat fueled by faith and fierce love. The shadows shrieked, furious. "You will pay. You cannot save him," they wailed, a cacophony of despair clawing at her mind. But she pushed forward. She could be the light they needed. Suddenly, those swirling shades began to separate, revealing glimpses of those they once were, frozen in time, their faces a mix of longing and regret. Each image a plea, a soul yearning for freedom. "Help us, Sarah. You can break the cycle," one spirit cried. The tether tightened within her. She understood their suffering. They were trapped, just as she was, caught in a cycle of shadows. But she did not have to bear this burden alone. "Listen to me," Sarah shouted, her voice echoing through the chapel like a beacon. "You are not just whispers of despair, you are fragments of hope. Together, we can find a way to the light." The tapestry sparkled again, and she felt Jake's presence surge forward, entwining with her heartbeat. "Use your love. Mom, please," he pleaded, a desperation ringing through his voice. With conviction heavier than the darkness, she opened her heart wide, raising her hands toward the swirling motes of sadness. "I am with you. I share my love, my courage. Let it be the bridge." In that moment, an alignment sparked. The radiant energy flowed, racing like a river, connecting with the shadows. The angry screams transformed, turning into wails of anguish, now tinged with hope. "No! Stop!" The shadows shrieked, but they could not break the connection. Bound by love, they began to unravel, light pouring into the darkest crevices. "Let them go!" Jake shouted, echoing his mother's resolute energy. The shadows writhed, yet as the warmth spread, the painful tales bound within them faded, replaced by the brightness of release. The eyes of the lost souls shimmered with light, filling the chapel with an ethereal glow. Freed from their torment, they cascaded into the tapestry, shimmering like fairy lights in a night sky. The shadows that had once consumed the room began to retreat, their power dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Within the chapel, the air transformed. It felt lighter, infused with the echoes of laughter, memories of love, and the purity of release. The faces began to shift, acceptance dawning upon them as they embraced the warmth filling the space. The energy radiated outwards, dissolving the prison of darkness. "Thank you," one voice whispered, softly filled with gratitude as the last remnants of shadows slipped away, drawn into the radiant light. And with that, silence enveloped the room, a serene stillness replacing the tumult. Sarah collapsed to her knees, exhaustion overcoming her. "Mom?" Jake's voice returned softly, and she looked up, her heart soaring as she saw him fully restored in front of her. "Jake!" She swooped him into her arms, warm and familiar. "You're back. I was so scared. But you found me, Mom." His face glowed with happiness. "You were my light." Together they stood amidst the remnants of the chapel, transformed now an architect of rescue for the lost souls who had finally found their freedom. Sarah breathed in deep, feeling lighter than air, enveloped in the light of love and the promise of new beginnings. They turned to the previously oppressive door, now radiant. As they stepped towards it, Sarah felt the warmth of countless souls cheering from behind her, welcomed into a brighter world beyond the shadows. As the door swung open, a brilliant light flooded the space. Sarah and Jake stepped through together, hand in hand. Together, they embraced the future, knowing they had conquered the darkness and freed not just the lost but themselves. With one last glance back, she whispered, "May love guide you all." And then they walked into the light, leaving the haunted whispers of the lighthouse far behind. The story had come to an end, but the echoes of their victory would resound forever. If you felt every pulse of this story, don't wait another second. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss our next exclusive journeys. Smash that like button now to fuel our presence. Your support is crucial. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to feel this power of love conquering all. Don't let the light die, help us spread the warmth.